Now that I've added the moldings, I can see there's a couple of things I'm not real happy with in this model. I'd like to add a face frame, another rail at the middle shelf, maybe 1.25 inches wide. Well, what that'll do is it'll spoil the spacing that I've got between the other shelves. If I were drawing on pencil and paper, that would mean a lot of erasing, a lot of redrawing to make the changes. In SketchUp, it's pretty easy to change things, and because parts are components, changing one part will change other ones. So let's start by putting the new rail in place. If I hover on that width and then come down, I can type comma 1.25, and I'll create a face that's the width of the space in between, and then 1.25 inches in height. And I can use push-pull to bring that out and match the thickness of the other face frame parts. I'll carefully select just that new rail and make it a component. I'll give it a name and click Create to save it. Now I've lost 1/2 inch between the bottom of this shelf and the top of that one. What I want to do is move everything in the model from this point up on the blue axis, or up 1/2 inch. So I'll select those parts, get the Move tool, just click anywhere and get it started on the blue axis, and then type in 0.5. So that moved the shelves, but it didn't change everything that I needed to change. The sides are now too short, as are the stiles in the face frame. I'll orbit around where I can get a look on things, and I'll change these components one at a time. I'll click on the side to select it, right click and open Edit Component. Then I can use push-pull simply to make the side longer. I'll click out in space to close it, come around to where I can grab the style of the face frame, select it and right click, open it for editing, make it the right length to match the top. Now because the style and the side are both components, you can see that it's automatically changed the other instances of those components in the model. So far so good, but now I also need to change the back and the location of the rabbits and the dados in the side. I don't have to edit the components where they are in place. I can bring another instance of the component into the model, edit that, and the ones that I really need will change along with it. So we'll drag in an extra cabinet side, double click to open it for editing, and I'll zoom in. And we can see that the rabbit for the top is too wide. When I changed the overall height, I didn't change this as well. So I can use push-pull, grab this bottom face, move that up 1/2 inch. Also, these two dados for the middle shelf and the one above it are a 1/2 inch lower than they need to be. I'll carefully draw a bounding box to select all of those. With the Move tool, I can pull those up. I want to make sure I'm on the blue axis. I'll type in 0.5 to move all those pieces 1/2 inch up, and then click in space to close a component. If I come over to my real model, I can see that that side has changed as well, and the parts are where I want them to be. This component, I simply brought it in for editing. I don't really need it anymore, so I can safely delete it. You'll notice when I deleted it, only that instance of it disappeared. These two are still side components, and I still have a copy of it available in the components window. I'm also having second thoughts about the two shelves above and below the middle shelf. I think I'd like those to be adjustable and set on pins in holes drilled in the cabinet side. So I'm going to start by making this a unique component, and I'll find it over here. And I'll change the name to adjustable shelf. I'm going to make a copy of the shelf and the cabinet side just so I have some room to work on them. I'll just pull them out here. I'm going to start by making the shelf shorter because it won't fit in the dado anymore. It wants to be a 1/4 inch shorter on each end. Now I'll orbit and zoom around it to look at the other end. I'll go up to the View menu, turn on the X-ray view, and I can use push-pull. When I see that highlighted, I know I've got the face of the component I'm editing. Make that the correct length. Then I can come and turn the X-ray back off, and I've shortened the shelf. The next thing I want to do is work on the side. So I'll double click to open the component, and I just simply want to remove the dado. I'm going to leave these lines in place for a moment so I can place the holes for the adjustable shelves. The shelf holes will be centered between these two lines, so I'm going to pull a guide line that's 3/8 of an inch down. Also want to come in from the edge 1.5 inches from the front and 1.5 inches from the back. Now SketchUp will remember the last dimension that I've used and will repeat it when I'm drawing guidelines. With that complete, I can remove these lines. I'm just selecting them and deleting them. And now I'm going to place the first shelf hole at the intersection. You first click on the point for the center and then drag out. Type in 1/8 for an 1/8 inch radius, and I have a 1/4 inch hole. Now I can quickly make several holes with the Move and Copy tool. I'm clicking on the center, I'm holding down the Control key, and I'm making a copy that's up 1.25 inches. When I have that first copy made, I'll type 2x and then hit enter before I do anything else. This made a total of 2 copies above the first hole. I'll do that again in the opposite direction. Make a copy, come down 1.25 inches for my center to center distance, type in 2x to make 2 copies at the same time. Now I can grab all 5 of the holes with Move and Copy, zoom in on the intersection, make the copies over on the other intersection. That gives me the holes on the face below the middle shelf. I'll also want to do that same procedure up at the top shelf. First I need to get rid of the shelf I don't need. I'll pan down to get my view. I'll double click to open the component, push pull to remove the dado, put in a guideline down 3/8, and then erase the 2 lines that were the dado. And I'm erasing those by clicking and hitting the delete key. Well, now I can copy all 5 holes from the bottom portion of the side, and I'll grab an easy to grab point, this intersection of the guideline and the front edge. Zoom out, zoom back in, and place those copies. Now I can use push-pull to make these holes 3/8 of an inch deep. I'll type in the number for the first one. Now SketchUp is going to remember the distance that I went for each hole, so I just need to double click on each face. That will quickly place the remaining holes. I'll pan down to get a look at the lower ones. Get push-pull by typing P, and I'll make the rest of the holes. Sometimes you'll lose your view and you'll need to enter the dimension manually. Now I'll just erase the guidelines. So now I've removed the dados, put the shelf holes in place. That happened automatically on the pieces that are in the model and on both sides of it. When you edit a component, all the instances of a component with the same name change. Now that didn't happen with the shelf because this shelf is still an instance of the fixed shelf component. Well, I can simply delete that one and then replace it with the adjustable shelf component. Now I can do that either by copying the one in the drawing, or I can drag a copy in from the components window. Now once I brought it in, the move tool is active, so I can spend a little bit of time here, get that positioned exactly where I want it in the model. So now I have my bookcase. All the parts are components. What's nice about this is I know what size these are. I didn't have to do any measuring when I copied from the conceptual model. I just used existing faces. I snapped my dimensions from place to place. Got a couple extra lines here I don't need anymore. I'll get rid of those on the style. And now I'm ready to start gathering information from the model. Now that the model is complete, I can use it as a source of information so that I can make every part out in the shop. To begin with, I'm going to make a copy of the entire model off to one side. Now my reason for doing that is I want to maintain a completely assembled version. I also want to make an exploded view. Because the moldings are components, I just pull them down along the blue axis. I'm going to explode this one. Remember, this is 3 distinct components. So I can just use the move tool and quickly spread these pieces apart. And I'll do the same with the molding up at the top. Because it's a nested component, I explode the main component. then the individual component pieces can be moved one at a time. This gives me a view of how the pieces are going to go together. Also, when I build this, the face frame can be considered a unit, and the cabinet carcass can be considered another unit. So I'll simply grab all four pieces of the face frame, and I'll move them away from the rest of the model. Actually, there's 5 pieces. I'll grab the one I forgot. Now with the case, I'll select the back, move it away. Grab one of the sides, take it apart, move the other side apart. So when I zoom and pan around, I can get a pretty clear picture of the steps I'm going to need to take to build this cabinet. So in just a couple of minutes, I've got an exploded view that I can work with. If I need to rearrange any of the parts, I can just select them and move them. What I think I'm going to do is take the face frame, just take all those pieces off to the side so I can concentrate on dimensioning the carcass. Get my view adjusted. The dimension tool isn't very fancy, but it's effective and it works very well. I want to click on one point to start the dimension, a second point to end it, and then I pull it away from the model. So by clicking on the various parts, if I want to come in to hit an exact point, I can do that. Then with zoom previous, I can come back to where I was. Sometimes with dimensions, there isn't quite enough room in between for the text to fit, so with text position, I can set it outside. The other useful tool that's similar to dimension is the text tool. When I click on a part, it places a text box at the end of a letter right outside the model. Now the first word that pops up is the name of the component. So I can add more text, say a material that I'm making out of, any dimensions or notes that I want to add. And then when I click out in space with the select tool, that text stays with it. Because all of my parts are components, I have an unlimited supply of them over in the components window. I also have an unlimited amount of space to work in. So if I want to make a copy of a part or a group of parts, I can do that, move it off into some empty space in the model, then zoom in to create a separate view like the parts of the face frame. So I can dimension all of these. That one I'll move the text outside the lines. I'll get my base rail. I can also move a dimension after it's in place, And you'll see that a guideline appears over the next dimension, and that just keeps things lined up to make the drawing a little bit neater. And as with anything else, it helps to zoom in, pick an exact point, then I can zoom back out and adjust exactly where the dimension is. There we go. That's where I wanted it. And if I get the length of the face frame, that completes the dimensions I need to build the face frame of the bookcase. And if I want a detail of a single part, such as the cabinet side, I can just pan across to get some empty space in view, go into the components window, find the side in my list, and drag a copy of it into the model. And I'm going to rotate that just so I can get a good look at it without seeing the rest of the model in the background. Now in this case, the overall size is important, but I'm also interested in the locations of where the dados are going to be. So I can zoom in, place dimensions for those, and I can come in as small as I need to. Now this may not print perfectly, but with the dimensions there, if I have a question while I'm out in the shop, I can zoom in and take a quick look at it. Likewise with the molding, I can pull this group of the top molding in, separate the pieces, and it's always a chore when you're doing something like this to try to calculate how many feet of the molding you need. Well, with the dimension tools, I don't have to do any adding or subtracting. I don't have to calculate how far it overhangs over the top of the cabinet. I can just click on the points that I drew, place the dimensions, and let the model tell me what size the parts are. And this is what I think is one of the really powerful things in SketchUp, is that I didn't do much adding or subtracting or calculating or multiplying. I started with this basic model, set the overall size, made a few calculations to get the parts, but most of the spacing and the sizing was done by the program. I copied those things to make a very precise model of all the pieces that I need. Then I can just make copies and generate all the detail views, different views that I want, that I need, and I can let the program tell me what size all the parts are. And that's just one of the ways that SketchUp is a powerful tool to make you a better woodworker.